Hey there, in today's video I would like to teach you how you can make your pieces better using a very powerful and simple visualization technique. Well, it all starts with identifying a piece on the board that you are not very happy with. And in this position for Vladimir Kramnik, it was the bishop on f3. Take a look at it. It's surrounded by its own color pawns around, and usually when players are looking to improve one of their pieces, they look at all the legal moves that you can make with that piece, and sometimes none of them are satisfactory. Well, my technique is involving imagining that you are having that piece taken off the board and having it in your hand. And then you can drop it wherever you want on the board. Now, only then, after you have the goal, that you're going to try charting the path to get there and identify the challenges that you perhaps need to overcome to get to that square. Such square in this game was b3. That was identified by a player, Vladimir Kramnik, who was playing here with the white pieces. And if the bishop lands on b3, you can see that not only there is a very long, beautiful diagonal for the bishop available, but also we would be having a tactic against the black's queen and king. So what then we do is we think, how can we drop the queen away so that we could open up this diagonal? And that is only the second task. First, it all starts with the goal. And in this position, the safest square for the queen, according to Kramnik, was on c1. And after black's next move, queen to c4, white beautifully maneuvered the bishop to b3 square. And in this position, you could see that the bishop is significantly better than it was. White's two bishops are looking very powerful. White is developing the initiative with knight to e6. There was a weak pawn on c6, and white is overwhelmingly better in this position. Let's take a look at more examples, and I will give you a chance to use that technique in this position. So here, I would like you to think about how you want to improve the knight. But remember, the way to do this is not think where the knight could move right now. Instead, we have to think about the final destination that you want to reach with that piece. Sometimes my students in this position think about knight b5, but that would be wrong, as the knight can simply be kicked away. When you move knights like that into opponent's territory, you have to consider where you're going to go if they get kicked away. And if you have to go back, then usually that's not a good decision. So I think that one of the best squares in this position would be f5. Here would be surrounding the black's king, so it's very, very active. And most importantly, it's an outpost because there are no pawns in the black's position that can kick me away from there. Then the next step is charting the path to get there. And with the knights, I usually like working backwards. So instead of trying to get the knight to f5, I'm trying to go back from f5 and finding the route this way. So what we can do is we can play a rook h1, which enhances the rooks. We don't want to make other pieces worse while trying to improve the knight. So this helps the rooks to stay active and also opens up the opportunity to move the knight to f5. And then in this classical game, white was able to achieve just that. Well, the attack is looking with a lot of potential, but we need to get the queen involved as well. So let's use this technique again with the queen. Think about the final goal. When I imagine queen being on any square on the board, I want h7 because I'm greedy and I want the checkmate. So that's what they thought, and then they're charting the path to get there via d1. We can move the pawn to f4. We can sacrifice if we're getting a lot of activity and a checkmate at the end. So white played on the next move f4, which opens up the diagonal, and they can take the bishop if they want to, but we have a lot of tactics, and in this classical game, this is the way it went, and white won a very beautiful game. Now, what I want to share with you is that not always the square that your piece can or you want to end up on is available for your piece. Sometimes you have to create such outposts, or sometimes you have to move one of your own pieces that is currently occupying that square. I love this example to illustrate that a lot. You see the d6 square. No other piece can even be compared to how great the knight would look at that square. So what black did over here was queen to c7, and followed it up with this maneuver knight c8 and knight to d6. And let's say white does something, it doesn't really matter what they do. There's very little that they could do tactically. But to illustrate the point, once the knight lands on d6, its quality to jump over pieces and pawns is clearly seen. We're going to be pressing c4 and e4, two weak pawns in the opponent's position, which likely is going to paralyze one of their pieces. And think about it, it's very economical for us. We get our knight somewhat paralyzed because it has to keep an eye on those two pawns, but white's queen, the most powerful piece on the board, is also paralyzed. And then we can use the remaining pieces for offense as well. So remember that not always the square that is the perfect square for your piece is available. Sometimes you can create an outpost, sometimes you need to get that square protected, and sometimes you need to move your own pieces out of that square to free up for the other piece. And last but not least, let's look at the game by the GOAT himself, Garry Kasparov. And over here, it's about queen improvement. I would like you to pause the video and think about the move that Garry played in order to make their queen better in this position. So the final square where I would want to end up with the queen is g2. That's checkmate. We're very greedy. And so Garry played the move rook c7, allowing the queen to come to a8, and then we want to end up with the queen on g2. And as we're creating these active threats, we're forcing usually our opponent's pieces to go in passive positions, or it allows our pieces to take even better squares than the ones they're on right now. So, of course, Viswanathan Anand didn't blunder the checkmate. They went bishop to e3, but thanks to the threats we're creating, now Garry was able to play the move knight to d3. And white is unable to take the knight over here due to the checkmate threat. Black had an ongoing initiative and soon won the game. If you're enjoying these lessons, consider hiring me as your personal online chess coach. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye!